Have you ever worked your whole life to build something no one believed you could, only to watch someone you love assume it was theirs to take? My name is Ariana West. You might know my music, or maybe you've seen the press coverage when I walked away from the spotlight to pursue something quieter, but far more personal. A life grounded in creation, not attention. After 2 decades in the entertainment industry, I traded touring schedules for architectural sketches and began building something I had dreamt of for years, a sustainable smart villa nestled in the hills of Big Sur. Every square foot was intentional, from the reclaimed wood staircases to the panoramic glass walls that opened out toward the ocean. This wasn't just a home. It was a blueprint of who I had become. Discipline, vision, and peace, etched into stone and steel. I named it The Cove. For the first time in my life, I wasn't building for an audience. I was building for myself. No paparazzi, no curated posts. Just design, silence, and a view that changed with the tides. And then, one morning, less than 24 hours before the official housewarming, I heard a voice echoing through my front hall, one that would dismantle everything I thought I understood about family. The day before the party, I arrived early with a simple goal: to walk through the house alone, to feel it empty one last time before it filled with laughter, music, and people I had carefully chosen to celebrate this chapter with. Me. My team had already prepped the space. Floral installations stood in the foyer, lighting cues were set for sunset, and a sommelier was curating a tasting experience using wines from the vineyard next door. I still remember standing by the front door, my hand hovering over the digital lock when I heard it. A voice. Light, excited, and unmistakably familiar. "This is the exact spot where the floral art should go," the voice said. "And over here, we'll have the harpist play while guests arrive." My heart skipped, not in a romantic way. In a "what am I listening to" kind of way. I opened the door quietly, stepping inside. The scent of fresh eucalyptus and rose still lingered from the staging team. And then I saw her, my younger sister, Jenna West, dressed in an airy white 2-piece suit. Her blonde hair pinned back in effortless waves. She was pointing across the grand room to a woman holding an iPad. They were talking about aisle spacing, decorations, the flow of guests, a wedding. My living room, the one with the custom Japanese tile and the sculpture from the Venice Biennale, had become a wedding venue. And I hadn't been told. I hadn't even been invited. "Jenna?" I asked, my voice as even as I could manage. She turned with the kind of smile that suggests you've both been waiting for something. "Oh, Ari, you're here early. Didn't Mom and Dad tell you? They said you were totally cool with us using the house. Connor and I thought it'd be the perfect gift. It's just so us, you know?" I felt time split, as if I were watching from a distance. Us? She walked through my villa as if it were hers, as if the property lines were invisible, as if my entire life, my labor, my solitude, my self-funded dream had been built not for me, but as a backdrop to her fantasy. That was the moment I realized. Some people don't steal your house in the middle of the night. They take it in broad daylight, and they smile while they do it. I stood there for a moment, not blinking, not breathing, the door still half open behind me. Jenna was now walking. The wedding planner through the living room layout, gesturing confidently as though this were a venue she'd rented or, worse, owned. I heard phrases like signature scent, sunset vows, and private drone footage for the ceremony. She wasn't imagining a dream. She was finalizing a plan. I stepped further into the room, the polished stone underfoot clicking, gently with each movement. My eyes scanned the space. Someone had moved the sculpture from its central place near the window. The arrangement of the seating had changed. Even the lighting had been reset, warmer and more diffused, romantic, not architectural. Jenna turned again, beaming. "You don't mind, right?" I mean, obviously it's still yours technically, but Mom said it's such a waste for a place like this to just sit empty. She tilted her head, that usual innocent expression stretched across her face. Besides, I thought this could be our way of reconnecting, like a new beginning. There are moments when the body registers betrayal before the mind does. My shoulders stiffened. My palms went cold. I couldn't tell if it was shock or the quiet devastation of recognition, because this wasn't new. Jenna had always rewritten history, always maneuvered situations to make herself the center, while I was expected to smile from the edge of the frame. I glanced toward the back patio doors. Beyond the glass, I saw them. My parents. My father was speaking with the catering staff, laughing with a glass of wine already in hand. My mother was pointing toward the infinity pool, explaining something to a woman holding fabric swatches. They weren't guests. They were hosting. I stepped out into the courtyard, the scent of the sea barely cutting through the sharpness now in my chest. "Mom," I said. She turned, visibly startled, but recovered almost instantly. "Ari, sweetheart, we didn't expect you until tonight. Jenna told you we'd be using the space for the ceremony, didn't she? It'll be just beautiful, and you'll still get all the credit for building it. Everyone will ask who designed this place, and of course, we'll tell them it's your masterpiece." I didn't answer. I looked at my father instead. He offered a shallow nod, not meeting my eyes. "So," I said slowly, measuring each word, "you're planning a wedding here, in my house, without asking me." My mother gave a dismissive wave. "It's not like that, Ariana. You've been so busy, always in New York or Paris or working with your firm. You're barely here, and Jenna's starting her life. She needs stability, a place that inspires her." "She needs my house?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. My mother sighed, then reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture she used when trying to pacify me. "Don't make this harder than it is. You have so much. Jenna has always been the free spirit. She's struggled to find her way. This is just a gentle nudge, a gift from one sister to another." A gift? The word hit me like a slap. In that instant, I realized this had been planned. My parents were not confused. Jenna wasn't overstepping. This was a coordinated decision, a reallocation of what they saw as family assets, mine, toward what they considered the more deserving party. Not because of effort, not because of ownership, but because Jenna was getting married, and I, in their eyes, had already won at life. I turned to Jenna, who was now standing just behind me, with her arms folded casually. "You've never lived in one place for more than 8 months," I said quietly. "You dropped out of 3 majors. You funded a crystal shop with my money, then ghosted your own clients. And now you think you're entitled to the one thing I've built without asking anyone for help?" Jenna shrugged, her smile faltering only slightly. "You're successful. This house is just walls. My wedding is a moment we'll remember forever. Can't you see that?" I had no words left, only silence. Deep and cutting. I walked back into the house, past the misplaced furniture and the strangers organizing someone else's dream. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door behind me. Didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat down at the window and looked out at the cliffs below, the vast stretch of Pacific beyond them. The same view that had once made me feel invincible now felt like a witness to something unraveling. I realized then that this wasn't about space. It wasn't even about property. It was about entitlement, about how, for some people, no matter what you've built, no matter how far you've come, your success is seen as a shared family resource, something to borrow, to occupy, to distribute, never something you own outright. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a quiet invasion, and I wasn't sure yet what I would do. But I knew one thing: they wouldn't be staying. That night, the house was too quiet. the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, but tightens around you like a noose. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same one I had commissioned from a designer in Copenhagen, the same one that now stood in a room full of shadows I no longer trusted. I could hear muffled laughter downstairs, Jenna's voice rising in a high, performative pitch, followed by my mother's warmer, practiced chuckle. They were still downstairs, planning, acting as though nothing was wrong. As though I hadn't just walked in on an active heist, except instead of burglars in masks, it was my own family, smiling, holding flutes of champagne. The next morning, I didn't go down for breakfast. I waited until I heard the hum of conversation, settle into a quiet rhythm, then stepped into the kitchen. My parents were seated at the breakfast nook like it was a casual Sunday in a home that wasn't mine. My father looked up from his tablet. "Good morning," he said, like nothing had happened. I poured coffee in silence. Jenna walked in a moment later, wearing my robe, the monogrammed one from Kyoto I'd picked up during an architectural tour. I turned to her slowly, and she laughed, as if I were being dramatic. "Relax. I didn't want to mess up my clothes with breakfast. We're family, Ari." That word again. Family. My mother set down her fork and leaned in with that tone she reserved for difficult conversations she wanted to sound graceful. "Ariana, let's not let this become a thing. We're here because we love you, and because Jenna's at a turning point. She's about to start a new chapter in her life." I met her gaze, unreadable. "You think I owe her my home because she's getting married?" "Not owe," she said carefully. "But it's the right thing to do. You're always traveling. You're barely here. You've moved on. This house could be a blessing for them, not just a monument to your independence." I placed my coffee down. "And I'm supposed to sacrifice the one thing I've built with my own hands because Jenna needs a pretty backdrop for her vows?" Jenna rolled her eyes. "It's not just about the wedding, Ari. This place could be where Connor and I start our family. I want my kids to grow up somewhere beautiful. Don't you want that for me?" The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were rehearsed, polished. A carefully constructed appeal that relied on guilt, not logic. I was being framed as the selfish one for protecting something I created entirely on my own. My father finally spoke, leaning forward, fingers laced like a professor. "We're not taking it from you. We're just realigning the use of assets. The deed is in your name, yes, but surely you know that homes like this benefit from being part of a larger family vision. Your sister needs a place to begin her legacy." The audacity of the word legacy nearly made me laugh. A legacy requires work, discipline, sacrifice. Jenna had never held a steady job. She jumped from startup ideas to mindfulness retreats to crypto ventures without a hint of permanence. And now, they wanted to hand her the fruit of my discipline simply because she'd decided to settle down? I said nothing. Not then. Not with words. I rose, walked upstairs, and opened the tall cabinet in my office. Inside was a leather folder, a project archive I kept for every build I'd ever worked on. In it were the receipts, contractor contracts, architectural sketches, inspection permits, and digital timestamps logged across years. Every nail, every imported material, every tax payment made from my personal account. I ran my fingers across the embossed label on the front. West Villa, full build record. It wasn't just a paper trail, it was my defense. That afternoon, my parents suggested resolving the matter peacefully by putting Jenna's name on, the title as a partial owner, just to make her feel secure. I declined. They looked at each other, then at me, as if I were unreasonable, as if I were the one creating conflict. That evening, my mother sat beside me in the garden with forced, "Calm, you don't have to make this a battle, sweetheart. What's a house, really, compared to peace in the family?" I didn't respond. I just watched the sunset reflect off the pool, casting gold light on the very stones I'd laid myself. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat with the folder in my lap, rereading every invoice, every permit approval, every decision I'd made without support, without applause. And I made a choice. This wasn't going to be a conversation, it was going to be a boundary. Because what they called love was actually manipulation dressed as concern, and I'd seen enough. The next morning, the sun poured into the villa through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. But instead of peace, there was tension baked into the stillness. I woke up with a strange clarity, cold, precise, almost surgical. Something in me had shifted overnight. The version of myself that had spent years smoothing over family dysfunction had left the building. What remained was someone who no longer needed to ask for permission. I dressed deliberately, in all black. Not for drama, but for armor. I walked down the spiral staircase to the open-plan living space where my family had once again gathered without invitation. This time, a few other guests were present: Jenna's fiancé Connor, the wedding planner, and a man I vaguely recognized from one of Jenna's influencer deals. They all looked up as I entered, but I didn't greet anyone. I placed the leather project folder on the dining table like it was evidence in a courtroom. Then I opened my laptop and connected it to the projection screen that hung near the west-facing wall. No preamble, no soft voice. I want everyone to see something. They watched as I opened digital files one by one: the architect contracts, time-stamped blueprints, wire transfers from my account to every vendor, permits with my name and signature, photos of the house under construction with me in work boots, standing on scaffolding. Every piece of documentation painstakingly organized, each one confirming that this home was built by me, for me, and no one else. Finally, I clicked open the property deed, my name, Ariana West, as the sole legal owner. No co-signers, no family trust, just me. Jenna's voice cut the silence. Seriously? You dug all this up just to prove a point? I turned to her. No, I brought this out to end. A delusion. She crossed her arms. You're overreacting. It was just a wedding venue. You act like we're trying to steal your life. I looked her in the eye, steady. You moved furniture. You hired a planner. You printed the West Estate on your wedding invites. You weren't borrowing the house. You were rebranding it. My father started to speak, but I raised a hand. Not another word. My mother stepped forward, her voice carefully balanced. Ari, what is this really about? Control? Loneliness? We're a family. We should be able to share. Family doesn't rewrite someone's success story to suit a fantasy, I said, quietly. And I'm not lonely. I'm selective. Connor, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Maybe this is getting too intense. We can find another venue. Jenna snapped her head toward him, stunned. Excuse me? He hesitated, then added, I didn't realize she was never asked. This feels wrong. Jenna's face twisted. Oh, so now you're taking her side? Of course. Ariana always gets the spotlight, the respect, the benefit of the doubt, and I'm just the sister who's trying. Well, maybe I'm tired of trying. Maybe I want something that actually works out for once. My heart didn't break at her words. It didn't even bend. I felt something more dangerous, nothing at all. You can want whatever you want, I said, but you don't get to take what's mine to get it. Jenna's voice sharpened. You're jealous. There it was. The word that had been flung at me since we were teenagers. The lazy accusation used whenever I refused to let her bulldoze boundaries. I let out a breath. I'm not jealous, Jenna. I'm exhausted. Exhausted by the idea that I must constantly defend the things I've earned because someone else feels entitled to them. My father tried once more. Ariana, don't escalate this. You're better than that. No, I said, I'm just not silent anymore. I walked over to the wall panel and pulled up the smart home settings. From there, I disabled Jenna's access codes. Then I texted my security company, requesting lock replacements within the day. I copied my lawyer in the message. "I'm giving you all 20 minutes to leave," I said, facing the room. My mother's voice trembled. "You're kicking out your family?" "I'm reclaiming my house," I replied. "You made a decision. Now I'm making one." Jenna stepped forward, lips parted in disbelief. "You can't be serious." I opened the main door and looked at her calmly. 20 minutes. After that, it's trespassing." The planner quietly packed her things. Connor followed, muttering something about needing air. My parents stared at me like I'd just burned a sacred bridge. I didn't care. When the last of them had gone, I stood in the entrance hall, sunlight gleaming off the marble floor. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with release. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing anyone else's comfort. I was drawing a line. And this time, I wasn't stepping back. I thought that once they walked out of the house, it would be over. That maybe, just maybe, they would reflect, regroup, and we'd find a way back to something respectful, even if distant. But I had underestimated one thing: how fast a story spreads when the villain wears your face. By the time I woke up the next morning, the damage had already begun. My phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications flooded in. Texts, DMs, missed calls, tagged posts. I didn't recognize most of the numbers, but the message was consistent. How could you do that to your sister? A video had gone viral. Jenna, tear-streaked and angelic in someone's car, giving a carefully edited monologue about how I had more than I could ever need, and how she had only wanted to get married in the home where we grew up playing pretend. The irony burned. She had never lifted a single brick in this house, let alone played in it. But the narrative was perfect. The misunderstood younger sister, cast aside by the cold, controlling older sibling. It was cinema, and people were eating it up. Even some people I thought knew better chimed in. An old high school friend commented, "Damn, Ari was always kind of intense. This checks out." A former producer messaged, "Hope you two work it out. Life's too short for grudges." No one asked me what happened. No one cared to. They just reacted to the version of the story that was easiest to believe. My inbox filled with guilt-drenched messages. Cousins I hadn't seen in years asking why I couldn't just let her have the house. An aunt I barely spoke to writing, "Family comes first, always." One text simply read, "You can rebuild a house, but not a sister." It wasn't the public that hurt. It was the private disloyalty. People who had seen me work 18-hour days, who'd known how I'd started from scratch after leaving the industry, now acting like I was the villain in a story I had written, with sweat and time. I sat alone in the reading room, the morning light filtering through the blinds, and I could feel it. The creeping sensation that maybe, somehow, this was my fault. That familiar voice in my head began whispering, was I too harsh? Should I have compromised? Should I have done more to keep the peace? And then, as if summoned by that weakness, another message came in, a voice note. My mother. "Ariana, you've made your point. But Jenna is hurting. She's not eating, she can't sleep. You've humiliated her. What's a house compared to your sister's health? To peace in the family? You have so much. Why are you being so cruel?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I played it again. Cruel. That was the word they'd chosen to brand me with. Not assertive, not principled, not even private, just cruel. But as I sat there, something shifted again. This time not with ice, but fire. I remembered being 14 and taking the blame when Jenna crashed my bike into the neighbor's car. I remembered footing the bill when she maxed out her first credit card, accidentally. I remembered flying halfway across the world to drag her out of a shady so-called retreat in Costa Rica, only to be told months later that I never supported her spiritual journey. Cruel? No, Cruel was treating someone's boundaries like invitations. Cruel was raising a daughter to believe that her silence was synonymous with peace. Cruel was expecting unconditional access to someone's work, time, and emotional labor. Then, calling them selfish for finally saying no. I pulled up my phone again and started blocking numbers. Jenna, my parents. The cousins who had flooded my messages. Not with hatred, but with finality. I knew forgiveness might come someday, but it would not arrive under threat. It would not be performed at the altar of guilt. That evening, I walked out onto the terrace as the sun set in bruised pink and gold. The wind swept softly through the olive trees, rustling the leaves like a private applause. I leaned against the railing, the city lights in the distance flickering like stars, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel invaded. But peace is never without its price. Just as I turned to go inside, I saw a notification flash on my phone, a Google alert I had set for my own name. The headline, Jenna West launches real estate brand, inspired by her sister's legacy, and beneath it, a photo. Jenna standing in front of my house, holding a rolled blueprint, smiling confidently. My house. My blueprint. My name. She hadn't backed off. She'd just begun again. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was theft. And I knew what I had to do next. No more silence. No more doubt. It was time to fight fire with facts. And this time, I wouldn't just protect my home. I would protect my name. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. I stayed at my desk, combing through every email, text, legal document, and photo connected to the house. The Google alert had detonated something in me, not just anger, but urgency. This wasn't about emotional boundaries anymore. This was a public misrepresentation of ownership. A calculated lie, professionally dressed. I'd seen enough to know Jenna wasn't just hurt. She was strategizing. The next morning, I called my attorney, Maya Holland. She'd helped me manage my business entity when I transitioned from entertainment into property design. Practical, direct, and allergic to nonsense, she was the exact voice I needed. She's calling herself a developer now? Maya asked flatly, after I forwarded her the article. Founder of West Coast Lux Homes, I said. Tagline, from vision to value, real estate reimagined. Maya exhaled slowly. Tell me this isn't linked to your house. I opened a folder on my desktop, dragging over screenshots of Jenna's new website. There it was. Glossy images of my villa, my renderings, even my garden sketches. Posed shots of her pointing at architectural blueprints she hadn't touched. Captions like, designed with soul, and crafted from scratch by our founder. Maya. Didn't speak for a moment. Then, she's not just lying. She's selling it. We both knew what that meant. If Jenna was using photos of my house to pitch investors, solicit interest, or acquire funding, she wasn't just misrepresenting the truth. She was potentially committing fraud. That night, I began tracking everything publicly associated with West Coast Lux Homes. A shell company, incorporated just 3 weeks ago, an Instagram account with over 30K followers, teasers about a boutique series of smart estates along the California coast, mentions of Phase 1 investors. It was sleek, curated, professional. It was a scam. The final blow came 2 days later when a former interior designer I'd worked with messaged me privately. Just curious, she wrote, attaching a screenshot. Did you branch out with Jenna on this? She's offering investor walkthroughs of your Big Sur villa, claims you're her silent partner. Investor walkthroughs? I called Maya immediately. We need to act now. She advised that we set a legal trap, a decoy investor expressing interest, using an alias we could control. If Jenna responded with terms, offers, or commitments based on assets she didn't own, we'd have proof. We hired a private investigator who posed as a potential backer, interested in the flagship villa Jenna claimed to be launching as part of her brand. Within 24 hours, Jenna sent an enthusiastic reply. Not only did she confirm the villa as her own property, she also attached floor plans. My floor plans, files I had designed, copyrighted, and never shared publicly. And there it was, stamped in the corner in small print. West Coast Luxe, design property of Jenna West. Maya didn't even flinch. She just handed us everything we need. Within days, we filed a cease and desist order. We contacted the hosting company behind her website and provided documentation. The site was temporarily disabled, but that wasn't enough. Jenna could simply move her scheme elsewhere. The damage wasn't just digital anymore, it was reputational. Then came the next wave. Jenna went live on Instagram, dramatically announcing that she was under attack by a jealous sibling, claiming that success always brings enemies and that she refused to be silenced. She called it a smear campaign against women building legacies. The irony nearly made me choke. That's when I decided to pull the full trigger. We compiled everything: screenshots of her website, investor emails, company filings, timestamps, and testimony from my designer. Maya helped me draft a formal complaint to the district attorney's office, not just for misrepresentation, but for identity theft, copyright infringement, and fraudulent business solicitation. I wasn't just protecting my house. I was protecting every young designer, builder, or creator who's ever had their work repackaged by someone who believed charisma was a substitute for competence. But the moment that sealed everything came, in the most unexpected way. Brandon, Jenna's fiancé. He showed up at my gate late one afternoon. No cameras, no entourage. Just him, holding a folder, looking hollow. "I think you need to see this," he said. I invited him inside. He laid out documents, email chains, screenshots of bank transfers. She used my name, he said quietly, to co-sign for a short-term loan, over $250,000. I never saw the funds. It was transferred to an offshore account under a company I didn't recognize, Crawford Consulting. My breath caught. Crawford was our mother's maiden name. She told me she needed a few names on paper to appear more legitimate to early investors, he said, eyes cast down. I didn't think she'd actually use it. He pulled out a final piece of paper. It was a mock-up of a new project. Crawford Residences, luxury for a new era. Photos of my house, with her face, my blueprint, her name. That was it. The next morning, we filed the full legal packet with the DA's office. Jenna hadn't just misused my property. She had orchestrated a network of lies that used my identity, my assets, and my silence. But that last piece was the one thing she couldn't rely on anymore because my silence? It was gone. Less than a week after Brandon came forward, the trap was fully set. Our legal team had everything: email exchanges, altered floor plans, digital timestamps, company filings, and now a list of investor names Jenna had shared with potential partners, all of them fake or untraceable. It was no longer about whether Jenna had committed fraud. The only question left was how far it had gone, and who, if anyone, had helped her build it. But even I wasn't prepared for how brazen her next move would be. Late on a Thursday afternoon, while I was reviewing design specs for a new eco-build project, my phone buzzed with an alert from my home's smart security system. Unrecognized group entry at main level. 3 persons. I clicked into the camera feed. There she was, Jenna, standing in my living room, wearing white again, holding an iPad, surrounded by a small group of sharply dressed individuals, investors, clearly, taking notes, filming with their phones, nodding, as she gestured confidently around my space. I unmuted the live audio just in time to hear her say, "This is the prototype of what West Coast Luxe will be scaling. Designed by yours truly, every detail you see here has a sustainable, narrative-driven element. The staircases, reclaimed mahogany, the glass, custom-tempered for thermal regulation. I designed it to breathe with the land." My hands clenched so tightly I didn't realize my nails were digging into my palm. She was walking them through a fantasy, dressed in my reality. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number for local law enforcement, my voice clipped and measured. "This is Ariana West. There is an unauthorized group on my private property at 77 Ridgecrest Lane. The main individual, Jenna West, is currently subject to a cease and desist for impersonation and misrepresentation involving real estate fraud. I have active surveillance footage and documented evidence of a restraining clause related to this asset. Please send officers immediately." 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed outside the villa. Through the security feed, I watched as the front doors opened and 2 officers stepped inside. Jenna paused mid-sentence, then stiffened as they addressed her directly. "Are you Jenna West?" one of them asked. She nodded, smile faltering. "We need you to step outside. You're currently in violation of a civil order and are under investigation for fraudulent misrepresentation of ownership. We're going to ask everyone here to remain where they are." "What?" No, this is just a walkthrough," she said, her voice pitching upward. "It's a family home. My sister is overreacting. I was just showing some friends around." "Ma'am, step outside now." One of the investors, a tall man in a navy suit, turned to her, furious. "Wait, this isn't your house?" Jenna's mouth opened, but no words came. That was when I walked in. I stepped through the front doors with the deed in one hand, a USB stick in the other. "Apologies for the confusion," I said calmly. "This home is registered solely to me, Ariana West. Every document, blueprint, and design element has been filed under my business entity since ground was broken. What you've just witnessed was a criminal impersonation of a licensed designer and a misrepresentation of ownership." The silence was heavy. Jenna stared at me, betrayed not by tears, but by disbelief, as if she still hadn't accepted that this moment, this consequence, was real. "You called the police?" she whispered. "I called the truth," I said. The investors began stepping away, muttering to each other. One woman looked physically ill. Another man took off his visitor lanyard and left it on the table before walking out. The officers handcuffed Jenna gently, but firmly. "You can't do this," she cried. "You're ruining me. You're ruining everything." I looked at her, unflinching. "No, you did that. I'm just done cleaning up the mess." She was escorted out through the front doors, the officers reading her rights as the sun dipped low across the Pacific. The moment should have felt victorious. It didn't. It felt necessary, like closing a door that had long been open to rot. But it didn't end there. 3 days later, I sat in the courtroom. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, and rows of press and onlookers lining the benches. Jenna appeared in a pale blazer, wrists no longer cuffed but visibly trembling. Her attorney requested a delay. The judge denied it. What followed was a reading of the charges: fraudulent misrepresentation, commercial impersonation, unlawful access to private property, attempted wire fraud, and identity misuse under California commercial codes. But then came the part I hadn't expected. My parents were named in the documents. Their signatures had appeared on several early-stage funding applications under West Coast Lux. One of the largest transfers, nearly $200,000, had been guaranteed by my father's retirement trust. The court was investigating whether their participation was unwitting or complicit. When the judge read out that section, I felt something inside me collapse. It was one thing to be betrayed by a sister drunk on image, but to discover that your own parents may have underwritten the lie? The rest of the hearing blurred together. Jenna pleaded not guilty. The DA countered with evidence we had spent weeks compiling. A preliminary trial was set. The media caught on fast. That night, I walked back into the villa, every room dim and echoing. I sat at the kitchen island and poured a glass of water. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something heavier, Something final. My home was finally protected, but my family, that would never be the same. When the trial ended, there was no applause, no emotional release. Jenna was sentenced to 4 years for commercial fraud and impersonation, with parole eligibility after 2. My parents avoided prison, but were fined and legally barred from participating in future financial ventures on my behalf. The courtroom emptied, the news cycle moved on, and I was left with something I hadn't expected. Silence. A silence that wasn't hollow, but full. Final. I didn't celebrate. I didn't announce anything. Instead, I poured myself into work. The villa, once a battleground, became a sanctuary again, but not just for me. I opened it to a program I'd always dreamed of creating, a residency for young women in architecture, design, and spatial arts. Each quarter, a new resident lives and creates here, surrounded by the very walls that once taught me what it meant to protect something you built with your own hands. There's a quiet poetry in that a place once nearly stolen is now a launchpad for others. One night, after our first resident hosted a showcase of her work in the West Courtyard, I wandered out alone. The breeze off the cliffs carried the scent of lavender and salt. I sat on the stone bench at the edge of the garden, where I used to feel anger, then grief, then nothing at all. Now, for the first time in a long time, I felt settled. I had my life back. Not just the house, not just the name, but the clarity that comes with finally drawing a line and standing on the right side of it. Weeks later, I received a letter from Jenna. Not dramatic. No tears. Just a quiet line that read, "I'm not asking for anything. I just hope someday you'll see me as someone trying, not someone taking. Not your sister. Just a person." I folded it and placed it in the drawer where I keep the things I've chosen not to carry anymore. Not out of bitterness, but because growth sometimes means leaving the door closed, even if you've forgiven what's behind it. That night, I posted a photo of the villa's terrace at sunset. No caption. Just the light spilling across the stone. Within hours, the comments started flooding in. I needed this today. Thank you for showing that protecting yourself isn't selfish. I've been through something like this with my own family. I thought I was alone. You're not. None of us are. So if you're reading this and you've ever been guilted for choosing boundaries over guilt, or for valuing your work when others tried to claim it, you're not cruel. You're clear. And clarity is a gift you give yourself when the world won't hand it to you. Have you ever been told to be the bigger person at the cost of your peace? Did you stay silent? Or did you speak up? Maybe too late, or maybe just in time. Share your story in the comments. Someone else might be scrolling through, hoping to feel a little less alone. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your worth, your work, your voice, follow this channel. There are more stories coming. Stories about the courage it takes to say no, the strength to rebuild, and the quiet kind of power that doesn't shout, it simply stands.